Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Intelligent Sales Forecasting. I am very excited to introduce you to Jeremey Donovan, whom you may already know already. He is the SVP of Sales Strategy at SalesLoft, my former colleague and friend, also host of the most excellent podcast called Hey Salespeople. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. And we also have Joe Monastero, our head of sales at Revegy, on the line. And Joe and I are going to kind of be jumping in and out of the chat and asking questions of Jeremey, translating your questions to him. We want this to be very interactive. We've set up, I think it's 4 polls, so hope that you participate in those, but also feel free to jump in with questions in the chat window, and we will jump in and try to in a friendly manner, interrupt Jeremey. So with that, I will turn it over to you to get started, Jeremey, and we will talk to you guys throughout.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the intro, and it is a super joy to work with you again, Laura. We're serious about interactivity here, so 2 forms of interactivity. We've got a bunch of polls to kind of keep things interesting and give you guys some guidance on forecasting. And then secondly, just strongly encourage you to put questions in the chat. Laura and Joe will be helping to queue those up as we go. So I love to stop and elaborate on things that you guys are passionate about. And so to the point of interactivity, we're going to do it like right off the bat. So we're going to queue up our first poll here. And the question here is, what's your biggest forecasting challenge? So adherence to the process means you have a process, but the people on your team are not necessarily following it. Second is, okay, you got a process, but maybe you don't have tools that help you actually execute that process, that you could use better tools. And then the third one, the forecasting rhythm, is basically I don't have a process, right? Like our company just kind of figures out forecasting ad hoc, or we're still building our forecasting and so on. So we'll give folks a second to put that in. This is near and dear to my heart because I did not consider myself to be particularly expert at sales forecasting, and I think these days it was really hard to forecast in the last year. But even before that, I would say we didn't necessarily have the data, tools, processes to be able to do that. And as your companies mature, especially, I know there's a lot of enterprise folks on the call. I would assume you probably have some kind of rhythm in place. So let's take a look at the results. I know it takes a second to process up. All right, there we go. So interesting. So 40% of people work for companies where there actually isn't necessarily a forecasting rhythm in place. So that's a lot higher than I would have expected. I think that's the big surprise to me. I would have expected like the adherence to process. I guess we could add another question here, which is like, is your forecasting great? I guess we'll have a later poll on that. So, well, let's dive into it. So, I was an engineer originally by training. I was a semiconductor engineer actually, and I really went into the world of forecasting with this data and analytics bent, and I truly felt that like, let's just get all the data. Humans are terrible at making judgments about highly uncertain things. So why don't we just take the humans out of the equation? And that was I think that was like my naive early days in sales operations and sales strategy. And then what I ultimately came to realize was like there is so much, especially in the enterprise sales forecasting world, that is a combination, right, of all of these things, right? There's people, there's process. It's almost like the technology in some ways, contrary to what I had believed, is the least important. I would argue actually that the people side is by far the most complex and the most important. That you can try to instill a forecasting rhythm in your company, but if your CRO does not demand that people follow that process, it's not going to happen. If your first line sales managers are not forcing that process to be followed, if they're not asking the questions that are in your sales methodology and so on, then it's just not going to happen. So the people side is a big piece. We will today focus on kind of all 3 of these pieces, and I'll talk to you a lot about how we at SalesLoft forecast, particularly in our enterprise business. Again, since this is more enterprise focused, I'm not going to talk as much about the SMB, and I mean, mid-market is actually relatively similar to enterprise, but I'm not going to talk as much about the SMB world. But if you do have questions and want to follow up on the SMB side, I'm super hyperactive on LinkedIn, and you can just hit me up there with a direct message, and we can talk SMB forecasting. All right, so let's keep going. So what should a forecast actually include in it? The first two things that are in here, I think, are the pretty traditional ones that are in most people's forecast, right? You've got everything in the period that, let's say you're looking at a quarter forecast, everything that's already closed. And then the second piece, right, is all the ops that have in-period close dates. But one of the things that throws off forecast accuracy is these other pieces that folks don't necessarily have. And I almost wish I guess I can go back and reverse the order of these, but I'll talk to them in reverse order. So one is you've got other ops, right? And they're, if you're anything like the organizations I've worked in, you've got a whole bunch of ops that are basically sitting in the first week of the following quarter. Joe, and I would assume in your world, you probably get on top of your sellers too, because they are hiding deals. They're parking the deals just outside of the forecast window. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. We've talked about this, the whole sandbagging mentality or pushing it outside of the forecast. I was like, look, if you're going to do it, as long as I know about it and I can plan to it, I'm good with it, but just don't hide things. So that's definitely something people have a tendency to do, to save themselves just in case things go wrong.
Yeah, and there's like two, you mentioned the word sandbagging. I think there's a couple of forms of sandbagging. I'll talk to the other one in a little bit. One is parking the deals outside of the quarter because then they're going to surprise you and delight you by closing it early. There's other forms of sandbagging, which is adjusting the deal size in different ways. Then the last thing is one that I think is a little less relevant in enterprise, but still important, especially for, a lot of enterprise is not just new business. It's very, you're often landing and expanding, and although the land deals might take, 3 months, 6 months, a year. We've had enterprise deals that easily took us, 12 to 18 months to close. I'm sure that's not uncommon for like very large deals with very large enterprises. But especially on the expansion side, stuff comes in, right? People want more licenses. People want to upgrade. You might be cross-selling something, and you don't have to go through all the different legal reviews and privacy reviews and InfoSec and all that kind of thing. So you do need a way to estimate that quote unquote, I call it run rate. I'm sure there's a better term for it, but the run rate of ops that are actually be created and closed in the period. So those are all the pieces. Those are all the pieces there. We're gonna fire up another poll actually right now. So here's the next one, right? So let's imagine you're and this context is super important. So imagine you're at day one of the quarter and you're trying to project out how accurate your forecast is. So a lot of industry pundits out there will say, like, you should have plus or minus 5% forecast accuracy but they don't always say, but I want to be specific here, right? Which is from day one of the quarter to where you actually land. So plus or minus 5. Next one is in the range of 6 to 15%. We gave a pretty big range there. And then are you off by more than 15%? Or you may not be sure. When Joe and I were talking about this yesterday, we were sort of commiserating, laughing at the fact that no one ever gives that context about day one. But then the other thing we were laughing about was, forget about day one of the quarter, like 3 days before the end of the quarter, are you even within plus or minus 15%?
Well, and then my favorite is the whole quota versus your forecast. And there is a strong difference between those two things. If you're calling a forecast, doesn't necessarily mean you're hitting your number, which is always interesting in there, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like people will say, hey, I made my number for 15 straight quarters, but it wasn't necessarily that they were within plus or minus 5. It's that they set a low enough bar that they were able to clear that hurdle. Yeah. So, indeed, the plus or minus the vaunted plus or minus 5, as you can see, is a fairly rare occurrence. And I really do wonder if people can achieve that consistently. I've not really seen that with as much analytical rigor as I've tried to put into forecasting processes. It's just really complicated. But I think 6 to 15 is solid. So that's really good to see. So that makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot more sense to me than the plus or minus 5%.
Yeah, definitely. Jeremy, we just had a question come in from the audience. What is best practice around this accuracy? How accurate should you really aim to be?
I'll answer that in two ways. I mean, the first is, again, the people who don't actually have to do this for a living, right? Like the consultants, not to put consultants down, too much here, but like they all say plus or minus 5%. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. That next range of being like in that 5 to, whatever it was, 6 to 15. So call it like plus or minus 10. I think plus or minus 10 is pretty good. I was having a discussion. I'm actually, COVID has given me time to actually take some classes. So I'm taking a class in data science, and a version of this question came up, not exactly in sales forecasting, but it was related. It was basically like, if you have a statistical range for where a forecast should lie, where should you, like, what number should you use? And a lot of people's response is sort of, okay, if your range is whatever, 50 million to 60 million for whatever the period is, quarter, year, it depends on whatever. Then should you say 50 or 60? Well, you should say 50, right? And then you're gonna beat that number. So you kind of want to take the low end of the range. But there is an asterisk on that, which is if you forecast too low, then you run the risk of not having enough capacity or missing out. So I'll give you two places. So if you're in a like a low variable cost business, like a SaaS business, then if you forecast too low, you might not have hired and trained enough reps that you could have done better. And if you're in a manufacturing business and you forecast too low, then you might not have enough inventory on hand to actually fulfill demand. So there are situations where, like, having improved forecast accuracy can have a pretty tangible impact on the business. But again, that's my long-winded answer. The short-winded answer is, I would say, aim for that plus or minus 10, maybe
10
even plus or minus 15%.
Yep. And I think that makes sense. And as you said, right, there's lots of different variables that can affect that. And actually having that forecast accuracy can drive an improvement in business, especially when you're looking at supply and demand on that aspect of it. But we all know the last 12 to 14 months or so have been completely different. And having a forecast in general is a feat in its own. So I'd be curious, when we look at this afterwards or put a poll out on LinkedIn to see what people's accuracy has been over the last 5 quarters. And to take a look at that data.
It's super tough. I saw, now I can see the chat finally. So someone asked also, like, what if you're going on a rolling basis as opposed to forecasting like once at the beginning of the quarter and then just waiting? So in fact, that is what we do. I don't know what you guys do at Revegy, but at SalesLoft, that's what we do. We forecast basically on a rolling basis. So we're basically looking at this month, next month, this quarter, next quarter. Those are our sort of 4 things. And so if we're in a quarter, right, then we're gonna look at effectively all 4 of those things. And our forecast updates dynamically as new stuff gets added to the pipeline, as stuff gets closed, right? All of that kind of happens. So I would say even better than again, I tend to be long-winded in my answers, but the gist here is I think that's a good rhythm to be in this month, next month, this quarter, next quarter, and be looking at that at preset days.
Yep, and that's similar to what we're doing. And long-winded in this scenario is good. The devil's in the details when it comes to forecast. If you're not really looking forward to that following month or that following quarter to understand how things are positioning, when you get into that actual month or quarter, you might as well go in blindfolded. You have no understanding of what's potentially there. And I really think that sales velocity plays into that as well. If you're looking at opportunities and understanding and how they're entering their pipeline and really where that true win could be, that's another piece that comes in. But yeah, so at Revegy, we're looking at quarter plus 1 and then really trying to center around what's coming in for that month so we can plan cash flow in different pieces there.
Yeah. So Joe mentioned sandbagging earlier, and like this is a place where, what should be in your forecast and how should you track it? No rocket science here. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, but I think this is where the sandbagging comment comes, which is like the close date, no hiding the deals. We'll talk about stage and forecast categories, since those are critical, especially forecast category in the world of enterprise. Stage is a lot more applicable in the SMB world. Forecast category, I find, is more useful the enterprise world, where so much of the information does not exist in CRM or even recorded conversations. There's just a lot that is in the tone and body language and interactions between the seller and the prospect. The amount place is the part where, like, when I work with sales teams, I think this is the place where you just have to beat this drum constantly, that this is the amount if the deal closes, right? I don't want you to probability weight the amount. I find so many reps try to probability weight the amount and then they sandbag there. That's the place I think is like where the most dangerous things happen with respect to forecast accuracy because of hedging there.
I completely agree with you. I've always walked into companies in the past and they've done that weighted forecast amount based on stage or percentage likely to close. That is in my opinion at least, and other people might have success with it, and then caveat that, it's a horrible way to do it. You could have a 10, 20, 30% deal. That doesn't mean that there's a 30% likelihood that it's going to close and therefore should be weighted in terms of value. You could have a 90% likely to close and still lose that deal. You never know what's coming in at the 11th hour, especially over the last year or so. Those blind spots are too rampant to be able to plan that way.
Yeah, and I mean, in reps, right? You to be a successful rep, I think you have to believe that against all odds you're going to win the deal, right? Like, in some ways, that's why I'm in sales operations and sales strategy. Maybe it's like those who can't teach, perhaps, but it's because that sort of optimism. I think of myself as optimistic, but I don't have that kind of optimism. I'm too like analytical and judging whether this will go or not, and then that would probably lead me to be an absolutely terrible rep.
Yeah, that's dangerous optimism right there. The happy, so to speak. You don't want to be at too much of that, but you got to base it in reality. But always push for first place, right? You're first or last in sales. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, someone actually had a LinkedIn post on that, because I think that was a Ricky Bobby quote, right?
Exactly.
Something like, "If you're not first, there's winners and there's not winners," or whatever. I don't know. I got to rewatch that movie. Probably it's a good time to do that. So, how do you do this? There's lots of different ways. SalesLoft, and this is the only commercial part of the stuff I'm going to do. I hate selling from the stage, but here is like, we have a utility within part of feature, I should call it, I guess, within SalesLoft that allows you to, look at your deals, update the stages, close dates, all those fields. There's a lot of stuff out there to be able to do that. So it's sort of one component of things you do, but it's just one of the keys here is like that rhythm of just making sure that you're updating that constantly.
Yeah, we love that too. That's actually something we use at Revegy, and being able to call out the different issues that are happening with the deal really helps drive the forecast predictability and the accuracy. Knowing that something's over 45 days in a certain stage, or that there's not a value or next steps associated with it, I think it keeps accountability on the reps to make sure that they're pushing forward, but it also gives visibility to the leadership team. I look at that on a daily basis just to know where I want to prioritize my coaching and mentoring time for that day or that week, and make sure we're driving to a good forecast close for that month or quarter.
Yeah, we'll talk about the AI ML stuff at the very end, but even basic stuff, as you're mentioning, of being able to identify deal gaps and being proactively notified, right? That, this deal is over 45 days, or you're in this stage and you have a close date of, or you have you have this in commit, and like, there's no way, right? So to be able to tell you those sorts of things, I think, is critical. That doesn't require super sophisticated analytics, right? I mean, you just do some basic computations for your business about what's kind of normal and usual, and you can highlight those deal gaps. I was talking to some people who have implemented some kind of fancier AI for forecasting, and they said, and this is, again, I think this stuff is very intuitive to salespeople. They said the single best predictor of whether a deal's on track or not is the last time you got an email or were in a meeting with a prospect. So if it's been, something like, if you haven't heard from them in more than 2 weeks, like, the deal's in trouble.
The dreaded dark mode.
Getting ghosted in sales. Yeah, it's not even ghosting. It's just, people get busy, and if it's not top of mind for them, then the deal's not moving forward. We'll talk about some techniques to make sure the deal keeps moving forward. So I framed earlier that we're going to talk about enterprise. There truly are different forecasting approaches. So, if you're about to institute some processes for your company, just a forewarning as avoid a mistake I made, which was to try to impose a particular forecasting approach in both SMB and enterprise. And they're just really, really different. You really want to use stage-based forecasting with a lot less overhead in the SMB space, and you got to do something different in enterprise.
Is that for the transactional nature of SMB? Is that where that comes in?
Yeah, it's transactional. It's like you don't need all the extra steps, right? You don't necessarily need a mutual plan. I was talking to a rep earlier who a guy, he's in Ireland, he works for LogMeIn, and we were talking about like the use of mutual plans in the commercial part of the sales segment. He's like, yeah, most of my deals are because there's like high volume stuff, 5 to 20K for that guy. Right. And he said for 5 to 20K deals, I just can't, right? I'm not going to go through a mutual plan.
No, right. That transaction, that level, that dollar amount, that could fall in and out, similar to what you talked about up front of these in-flight, in-quarter type of opportunities that they just pop up and close almost without you having to put that effort in to forecast those or put that forecasting rigor on it. Just doesn't
for an upgrade, like a smaller upgrade, even in the enterprise segment, just doesn't make sense. So what's enterprise? I'm defining it here as your sales cycle is longer than the forecast window, and that's the key, right? Is on the transactional stuff, it's like you're a pretty fast. It's not so much that it's quote unquote transactional, it's that it's super fast. You talked to Joe earlier about velocity. It's all about the velocity, and this is where the every deal needs inspection, because you got a team of people on the seller side, and then you've also got a team of people on the buyer side. So I bring whatever, like Salesforce comes to mind, right? Benioff, I'm probably not flying around as much now, but like that's a big part of his job, right? As he goes in and as Salesforce has gotten bigger and bigger, he goes and meets with the CEO of JP Morgan and the CEO of this and that and the other thing, right? But the involving executives, the executive sponsors getting involved in larger and larger deals, I think is critical. Joe, I assume they pull you in, right? I mean, how often do you get pulled in on deals?
Honestly, at this point, on a majority of them, and I've actually had to push back on the sales team and say, look, we want to preserve some of that executive sponsor allure and not have me in on that initial demo or that initial call. And I get the power of it. And that knowledge helps, but you still got to push that to the back end. But you're absolutely right. It's more and more frequent now that we're going down that path.
Yeah. One thing I'd love to, if we were doing a podcast and I was interviewing you, Joe, for a podcast, I would ask you the following question, which is like, actually two, when is the right time? Because this does critical to improving forecast accuracy, but when is the right time to pull an exec from your company into a deal? Like, when should your salespeople bring you in? Should they bring you in kind of early, middle, end? When is the best time?
So I want to be aware of it early, but I don't want to be brought in till that transition from middle to end. We've articulated value. We've had conversations around the demo, even the functionality aspect of it. You're aligning with their outcomes, and now it's time to come in and bring the hammer, so to speak. Push that over the line to show we're pushing this from an executive level. We're driving a partnership, and we want to align with your executive team to make sure that those initiatives are being looked at from the top down, and we're aligning with that.
Yeah, right on. I guess the other part of the question is, not only when do you want to know, but the other part of the question is, what's your role when you get pulled in? Because I've seen things go different ways. Like, I've seen execs be brought in and torpedo deals because they didn't have the right context. I've seen them screw up deals, and the AEs are miserable, right? In those instances, That doesn't happen very often. But like, how do you want your reps to position you when you come into a deal?
Yeah, I've definitely had that happen in my individual contributor days. Luckily, I haven't done that to any reps yet.
Not that you know of.
Not that I know of, right? I'd love upfront just a little executive summary on what the use case is, what the needs are, kind of the positioning of pricing and the value aspect of it. But my role is really to offer that color from a thought leadership perspective or the direction of the company, right? To just ensure with that prospect that, hey, we're sticking around for a long time. We want to support this internally, give you all of the tools you need to be successful, in this case, with the Revegy platform. And I'm here for any help or questions you need on the back end. I don't want to be the one really having to first introduce any of those value points. That's where you get into trouble. Because if it doesn't align with their outcomes, then you're basically they're tuning out. It doesn't matter what I say as an executive, and that could definitely hurt the deal.
Yeah, you got to know the use case. Absolutely. Laura, I'm going to ask you to keep us honest on chat questions, because I can't see the chat window. It comes and goes for me. So any questions come in via chat, and if not, folks, ask questions. We will tackle them.
Yeah, no more quite yet. I think the next poll will probably spur a few, but yes, please remember to ask any questions you have in the chat. As a podcast host, I'm sure you can see that Jeremy likes the back and forth and interview format.
I do. I can't listen to myself talk. It's terrible. So you just mentioned another poll, so let's queue it up. So I'm super curious, right? We talked about sales process, but there's also sales methodology. And by methodology, a lot of people refer to these things like MEDDIC and BANT and other things as qualification. But in the enterprise sales world, and I think in the sales world in general, one of the epiphanies I've had over the years is that they're not qualification frameworks. They're actually deal inspection frameworks. They're deal health frameworks, right? So, as you go in week after week and do these deal reviews, you're going to measure them against some set of criteria. I'll say, again, in the spirit of people, process, and technology for improving forecast accuracy, this is one of them. So I would say an immature or unhealthy way of doing deal reviews is that you sort of show up, you pull up your op in whatever CRM you're using, and the sales leader then just asks questions, but they're always asking the same questions, and people don't realize it, but they often have blind spots. And like, they may always ask about decision process and economic buyer, but they forget to ask the questions on the other stuff. And I think a sign of a much healthier deal review process is actually to like force yourself in each deal review to make sure you're asking questions across the entire spectrum of the methodology that you're using. Before we see the results, I'm going to bet like MEDDIC is most common for this enterprise crew, but let's see what the answer is.
I'm going BANT. That's just the old school in me. That's always been the
other. Oh my goodness. Okay. So chat, please. If you're not using MEDDIC or BANT, can you guys put in the chat, what are you using for?
Yeah, we have one in there already. Jan says she's using InfoMintus methodology. That's a new one to me.
It is a new one. Yeah, it is. That's a new one. Anyone else want to chat in there what you're using if it's not MEDDIC or BANT? I'm super curious. HubSpot has one they use internally that's like GCPT. It's got like 8 letters in it. It's a lot.
One of the things we probably should have included in this poll is some variation of them, because I know a lot of people have had to make some changes, especially given all of 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
Modify.
Speaking of variations, we at SalesLoft, to give you guys as much of the sort of inside the factory as possible here. So we had a sales leader, a new CRO, join us about a year ago or so, and he brought with him a new methodology I had never heard of called ICED. And I started like scratching my head and comparing that to I keep a list of sales methodologies, and I realized, this is MEDDIC, but it's modified. So one of the appeals of BANT, right, is that it's very memorable. And you often see you'll see folks out there say like BANT is dead, BANT is terrible, but I think I think they're all the same. And I think the people who say BANT is dead are people, they with like a side agenda, and they say, oh, it's because you can't ask people if they have budget at the beginning, and you go and you can't go in that exact order. That's not the point, right? It's like none of these things are meant to be in order. It's just that happens to spell out something that's memorable and has 4 letters. Like the same thing with what we use is ICED, that we don't necessarily go in that exact order all the time, although pain usually is the first thing. But after that, again, every week you go through, we're talking about the pain, making sure that pain is still there for the customer. Maybe we're finding ways that it's affecting them more over time, right? We're asking the question about like coach versus champion, right? I'll tell people when they're selling to me, like, I can be your coach, but I'm not going to be your champion, or I'll tell you I'm going to be your champion. And what's the difference is a champion will introduce you to the economic buyer. I think that's like the key test. A coach won't do that. A coach will sort of tell you, here's how, they might describe the decision process in the organization. They'll give you information. They'll answer all your, they'll be friendly and answer your discovery questions, but they're not going to stick their neck out and introduce you to the economic buyer. That's a pretty clear sign that you got a coach and not a champion.
Yeah, I think that's the behind the scenes look, right? The coach can do that, but they're not necessarily in that position to make that introduction or even to drive the conversation forward. But they can still give you that detail that helps you do that or point you in the right direction, which is always good. So we actually have a call here sales. A question from the audience, right?
We got an opportunity here.
We have an opportunity. Let's go. Hopefully, right? But so what are best practices around prioritizing deal review? And are there any suggestions on how to scale this or stay out of the weeds as your team is growing? And I think you talked a little bit to this up front, that this methodology isn't really a set in the water, a process to follow, more so kind of a health check or a review. So what does that look like for best practices? Yeah,
and we're gonna talk a bit about that. So it's a good leading question. I don't know, I can't remember the slide order, but we'll talk a little bit about how you can like institute a process, because what gets calendared gets done, right? So I think that's critical. But I do think, right, having this that's part of the process piece. On the tools side, whatever you use, whether you use Revegy and or you use something else, or you use Salesforce, or you use whatever, like to actually have a visual that allows you to sort of understand where you're at in each of the facets of your methodology at any given time, I think is super critical. So, I mean, this is also on the next slide. I do remember that one. This is an example, right? So whether you use Medic or you use Iced or you use Bant or you use whatever, recommendation here is each time you go through a deal, and this could take 5 minutes of the deal review. It doesn't necessarily have to be super, super fast. And maybe even you just ask your reps to update this before you get into the room. And that way you can just scan it really quick, is just score your deals, right? This can be a section within an op, however you review those, and you can see the progression here. Obviously, I'm not going to read off all the slides. You guys will get the slides in advance. But we talked, for example, about like the champion versus coach thing, right? They're unknown. They're a coach, right? They're going to give you the information, or they're a champion, which is that you've actually tested by having them bring you the economic buyer. So, I think these are pretty common criteria of things that would apply. And you can, upon request, I guess, via LinkedIn, also, I can send you the Medic scorecard version of this, because I have one for the full Medic as well. And it looks similar. It's just, like you can see decision process, decision criteria, and competition, right? You can see the Medic fields a bit embedded within here. Right.
I think one of the biggest pieces to this too is doing this on an ongoing basis. And, from a prioritization perspective, like you said, this takes 5 minutes to just look through this. Keeping a trend analysis of this from week over week or month over month, depending on your sales cycle, for me, it's something that Revegy enables us to do. But I've been doing it for a long time. That's critical. You want to know if you're making moves forward, and that gives you visibility to if something that you're forecasting is actually going to close. If you have a stagnant deal and you're rating these at all ones or all certain areas for an extended period of time, there needs to be some coaching and mentoring being done there. And maybe that's the time. And the second part of this question was what level of leadership should drive this. Maybe that's where you drive it up. It's not your first or second line manager. That's when an executive steps in and helps to unstick this deal and push it through the funnel a little bit quicker.
Yeah. I'm going to comment on two pieces of that. One is like the 5 minutes you spend on this, then you get in the room, and if you're in commit and you don't know who the competition is, like that's not good. That's a red flag.
It's an 11th hour dead deal.
yeah, exactly. And then in terms of who needs to impose this, and I mentioned it earlier, and I'll repeat it again, because I think it's, again, the people part's the most important thing, is like your CRO must insist that whatever components of this you do, whatever your process is, that it gets followed every time. And to another point is to get to like tool adoption, right? if you have adopted a tool to help you do this, whether it's Salesforce or Revegy or SalesLoft or whatever you use, if you've adopted a tool, if the CRO ever gets in a meeting and they're doing a deal review and that tool is not used, then you stop and bring the tool up, right? Like I find so many times in a deal review, reps will want to bring up a spreadsheet, and I'll just say, nope, I'm not. We're not going to talk until you bring up the tool that we use for forecasting. I'm not going to look at your spreadsheet. Or they'll bring up a Salesforce report. Nope, like we have a tool for that. I'm not going to talk to you until you do that. So I think that's important. But then from an ultimate impact point of view, this is best lesson I ever learned, or much earlier in my career, probably 15 years ago, is sales organizations live and die by first line sales managers, period. Like they are absolutely critical to consistency of process as you scale the business. So your first line sales beyond the CRO, I'm middle management myself. So like I would consider myself a redundancy, but after the CRO, it is the first line sales managers, right? And they need to be bought in. They need quote unquote enablement to make sure that they're doing the same thing, right? Which is the CRO can't be there all the time. The sales manager also needs to say, nope, no spreadsheet, unless that's how you do it. If you do it on a spreadsheet, great, use your spreadsheet. But nope, no spreadsheet, use the tool.
Yep. No, agreed. I mean, we build that into our comp plans, and much to the chagrin of some people, it's you need to use the tools. If you're not, then you're not completing the table stakes aspects of your job. That's in your description. Follow the process. You can't be wasting technology. I've both been a victim to shelfware and have sold something that's turned into shelfware in the past, in my past positions. That's a terrible thing. You don't want to do that. It doesn't. No one's happy about that.
Yeah, one of my favorite books makes me think about this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott Malone. So she's an ex-Google person, and she wrote this insanely great book called Radical Candor, and it's this 2x2 grid. One is care deeply, and I think we as humans pretty much care deeply. Most of us, 99% of us, care deeply about others. But then the other dimension is challenge directly, and the issue is that we as humans are often non-confrontational and we feel super uncomfortable. The good news is salespeople are a little bit more comfortable, or successful salespeople are a little more comfortable with challenge, because they have to sometimes nudge the deals forward. And I think this is true of sales managers also, is like sales managers sometimes will be in the quadrant that book describes as ruinous empathy, which is like attaboys and attagirls all the time, but not holding people accountable in the ways that they should. So if you got to hold if you say you have to do this deal health score before the meeting so that we can talk about red flags, and they don't do it, then you have to hold them accountable. Like and the reason it's ruinous empathy, because you're actually not setting them up for success, and holding them accountable will actually help them be better salespeople.
We actually have a question in the chat too, maybe while people are answering this more simple question. Somebody asked, what if the challenge is in gaining consensus or agreement among sales managers for even what tools to use to start this process? Yeah, well, as you guys answer this, do you guys use mutual plans or not? I think it's a great question. I'll do another book. So there's a great book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, I believe they wrote it. And that book talks about basically change management, right? You're going to institute a new tool, process, what have you. And they talk about three pieces. And they use a metaphor of a rider on an elephant headed towards a destination. So these are the things you need to get right to institute, change management. So yes, the CRO needs to, have strong conviction and belief, but that's, necessary but not sufficient. The rider is you have to appeal to the rational, intellectual part of why using, a deal scorecard or a mutual plan or whatever is a good thing to do. The elephant is the emotional part. So you have to appeal to, an emotional win for them as well. And then a part that I think is not often said, and this is why I love the book and its metaphor, is the journey to that destination requires them to go down a path. So you want to make the path for doing that as easy as possible.
And that could be whatever, selecting a tool that they naturally use in their day-to-day life. Putting a link on their desktop, like whatever that happens to be, make the path easy. Outside of the sales world, it's like, I was lamenting when we were starting the call that I'm slowly gaining the COVID-19 due to access to the refrigerator, despite trying to get as much exercise as possible. And the metaphor I think it's also used in the book is like, look, put your running shoes and your workout clothes next to your bed so that when you get up in the morning, you put that stuff on and you go exercise. Like make the path easy. All right, so here we go on mutual plans. So we got about like a third use mutual plans all the time, about a third some of the time, and a third none. What are your thoughts? Because Joe, you do a lot of, your team does a lot of enterprise deals. What are your thoughts on mutual plans?
This is interesting. So this doesn't actually align to what we see in the market right now. Not surprisingly, mutual plans are one of those things that people get nervous about using. They're afraid to go to their client with a half-baked plan to get that validation or to have a conversation around it. We see really 15 to 20% of our prospects actually using true mutual plans. And in doing that, it's the majority of the time a closed plan. So they're looking at, hey, what are the evaluation steps and what are the decision criteria? That's it. Now, what we have up here is actually a mutual strategy plan, looking at, what are your outcomes that you're driving towards, or the overarching strategies that are important for you? What are the goals there, and how are you stepping down inside of the organization to get more and more granular until you come up with the issues and then overlay specific solution points to that issue to move towards that outcome. So that's something that's a little bit more complex. And when we flash this on any of our demos, people are a little nervous, like, whoa, wait a minute, what is this? And much to your point of making that journey easier, when people see a blank page and need to put a plan together, it's a no-go. They're going to click off and go someplace else, especially salespeople. We, at our core, don't like hard things sometimes. And that's nerve-wracking. So for us, and to kind of answer that last question and talk about the plans a little bit, putting a template in place is critical. That's going to ease that journey and show people that, hey, here's the normal steps we see, or the normal goals and strategies we see amongst our clients. Take a look at this, use it to validate what that client's doing. And then when you bring it back internally, you have that trusted advisor role already because you're bringing that plan to that person. You know what your path is and have line of sight to that finish line. And it just pushes you forward faster. So yeah, that 10 to 15%, and a lot of people are nervous to doing that.
I'm totally with you. Like I'm on the buying side 99% of the time in sales strategy and ops, right? People are trying to sell to me all the time. And it's a delight. It's a rare delight that the seller is actually executing a mutual plan with me. It's super rare. And I really do appreciate it because as you described, like the best sellers will say, basically they'll show me their template and they'll say, here are the things that we find usually have to happen when deals are done. Is this the path in your organization? And I might say, what I will say is like, security and privacy review at SalesLoft is like the hardest possible thing. Let's start there, because if you fail that, we need to rectify that or we don't have a deal, right? So like those sorts of things, they would never know unless unless we had that conversation. And I'm excited to have that conversation with them because I want to buy. Like if I'm at that point, I want to buy, right? And I need, in some ways, like I need their help because I'm going to have to bring a business case, and even if I have budget, like to get that budget released, I need to bring a business case to the CRO and the CFO.
And it's funny. One of the biggest things that people don't understand is that to get a deal done, there needs to be this buyer and seller alignment. Sellers are so focused on not listening to everything, waiting to respond rather than actually understanding and just driving to the finish line. That's where the happy ears things come in, right? And you're looking at, I'm closing this deal. And the buyer's still sitting there looking at 14 different options that you're one of, and you're not even on the top of the list. This drives that alignment. And the more that you can drive that alignment, the more clear your forecastability becomes on that deal and the more predictable that revenue is. And I think this goes a long way to do that.
Yeah, violent agreement here.
Yep.
So that was that question earlier about like, okay, well, what does the process look like? And this one comes from one of our lead investors, Insight Partners, and they work with a ton of companies, and they give us best practices to apply. So like this, they gave us this, and it's brilliant, right? So I talked about like looking at this month, next month, or this quarter, especially in enterprise, probably this quarter, next quarter. So you guys can just kind of rip this off from Insight Partners, and it gives you week by week what should you be doing. So some of the acronyms, I remember when I first saw this sort of threw me, but the CQ is current quarter. So you can see we're always doing that kind of current quarter commit. And then when you see NQ, it's next quarter. So if you're, for example, in week 5, right, your forecast calls, you're going to sort of take a break from the current quarter, and you're going to look at your next quarter pipe and look at a couple of the top deals. So I won't read the eye chart here, but literally you can rip and replace this, and then you double click on any given week. And in any given week, there's a whole cadence to what you do day by day. So that is, and this is like the full on thing. You can and should adapt this to suit your environment. But when they gave this to us, I was like, wow, this is pure gold.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to the conversation we were having yesterday, right? This drives creativity by constraint. That's the whole point of this, is to put someone in a box and say, here's all the things you should be doing. Now be creative about how you get it done. And that will drive significantly more success. I'm a firm believer in work smarter, not harder. And this seems like a lot of work until you look at it, understand it, and then get to apply your own spin to it.
I read a ton of sales books, and I read one recently, and I'm embarrassed that I forgot, and the guy will be really mad at me for not remembering like his name and the title of the book. But he wanted to write a book like Buy a Seller for Sellers. And he says some stuff that is kind of confrontational. But one thing he said, for example, is like, I worry when I see all the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday stuff, because I once worked somewhere where there was an edict from it was larger enterprise, global Fortune 500 company, and there was an edict from the CEO, actually, not just the CRO, but from the CEO, who said, basically, thou shalt not have any internal meetings Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because those are selling days. Period. You can put you can put internal stuff Mondays and Fridays. So that would be one way, for example, that to adapt this is to have a rule. I think that's a really good rule, by the way.
None of us follow it, especially now, but I think it's a great rule.
Yes. Yeah.
Death by internal meetings the last year.
Yes. I have 2 things real quick. One's a question, one's a comment. One, the comment is, Jeremy, you read a ton of sales books, and if you guys are not already following Jeremy on LinkedIn and checking out his blog, he does great summaries. And as someone that doesn't have time to read all of a ton of sales books, reading Jeremy's summaries, it helps me out a whole lot. And number 2, the question, looking at this and thinking about from a marketing perspective and how we're all moving towards account-based everything, right? Not just account-based marketing. What's marketing's role in this, and how are they informed or supporting the process?
I have some thoughts, Joe. You want to start with that from your side, and then I'll layer on.
No, go ahead.
You better answer correctly, Joe.
You take it first. I could get yelled at for this one on the back end.
I mean, this could take this is a whole webinar in and of itself, I think. But I would say that, I mean, it starts with coordination on the target accounts. And I can speak to what we do internally, right? So we do tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then non-tiered, but I guess you can call it tier 4. And we only have about 100 accounts that are in tier 1. And those tier 1 accounts get like extra love in every possible way, right? The marketing team is retargeting. The marketing team might build like microsites. The marketing team is using, that targeted search engine marketing in Google and LinkedIn and whatever. Like there's a full on thing, we might do extra special things for them, right? For if, when we're doing events, maybe they get speaking slots. There's a whole, right? The marketing team's job is to like build the package of ways that you're going to get that client, delighted and engaged. So I think we can go on and on, but that's my single best tip around how to leverage marketing is like tier that. The one other thing I would add is I find so often that marketing wants to define the list, but this is really important. Marketing ops, whatever, can definitely like do V1 of the list. But for this to be successful, and this is the single biggest point of failure I've seen, is that the sales team must sign off. Like the sales team has final sign off on that list. That's so critical.
Yep. I completely agree. I think so. We flipped a little bit on its head at Revegy, and we've iterated on this a whole bunch. We came into the account base process with, I want to say we started with 25, 30 tier one. So we do the tier one, tier two, tier three, and it's really one-to-one, one-to-few, and one-to-many approach. So our tier one is that ABM, and we're driving that forward with the one-to-one advertisements. And what we originally did is sales was like, yeah, sure, marketing, here's our list. You go ahead and do it. And that was it. And there was no both sides to this. Marketing was pushing out these ads. And unfortunately, on the sales side, we weren't really driving those cadences through SalesLoft as we use the tool and really pushing that forward. We've since changed that, iterated on it. Now we have our tier one is hyper specific. We're actually rolling out a new list next week, and it's going to be 15 of our top accounts that we're going after. It's going to be a joint approach where we have that one-to-one messaging, and sales is coming in behind, and we're putting a true cadence together that makes sense and aligns with that one-to-one advertisement that we're pushing out. Just driving that, I think there's a consistency in it, and that dual prong approach really allows you to push these advertisements out, but through gaining that mind share on the back end, push a lot of gives. And my personal opinion here is when you're going tier one, it's all about gives. Don't even push a call to action or an ask or anything until you're at least 30 days into that. They're going to come to you if there's a need. Absolutely. Especially if you're peppering them and they're seeing your name everywhere. If you're giving them something and it's providing value, they'll come to you immediately. But if you ask too far up front, they're going to write you off, and it's just another sales push.
I totally agree. I know, Laura, we should do another one where, like, because I can see you're chomping at the bit on this one too, to give the marketing perspective. So any one big tip that you see as critical?
I would say, kind of Joe covered it a little bit, but create the account with sales. And we've just transitioned into having a rev ops position rather than just marketing or sales ops, so that we're really doing all of this completely aligned and in lockstep. And that way, it saves money, it saves time, it saves our effort, our mind share. You're wasting time and spinning your wheels if you're not doing it all together.
I promised to talk briefly about AI ML, so I'm going to kind of breeze through this one pretty fast. But this is sort of, the traditional way that we'll roll up our forecast. I would describe this as more of like a pipeline coverage approach in some ways. Is that you add your commit, your close, and your probable, and that gives you like a back of the envelope estimate, which is a pretty good estimate for where the quarter will lie. And then we've got additional categories, forecast categories. What I would like to see more people do though is there's weighted pipeline. By stage is very common in SMB. I would like to see more people do weighted category weighted forecasting. So like, don't just roll this stuff up and use a ratio, but actually weight the categories. But that's kind of simple and maybe for another time. So I did want to close with a few thoughts, make sure everyone gets on with their day on time. But I wanted to close with a few thoughts on like AI ML. So as I said before, I'm taking classes in data science, so I'm pretty passionate about the topic, but I really think we should think for now about like augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence, right? So especially in enterprise forecasting, we don't yet have the ability to, like even if we recorded every call and knew every interaction, if the intelligence read every email, like knew everything, the language processing and tone processing is not at the stage, even with IBM Watson or GPT-3 and all these different technologies. Like we're just not there yet. That there still is an incredible amount of human intelligence that needs to be put in the forecast. So I do think it is this combination. Is like we're ending where we began, which is you got to have a great process that humans drive. You got to have the right humans, and you got to have the right tech so that it's efficient. And we talked about shaping the path earlier. The tech helps you shape the path. So I'll leave that there. I want to make sure we put our contact info. And by the way, my LinkedIn is definitely the best way to get me. I'm pretty hyper responsive on LinkedIn. So if you guys want to connect with me, please do. Joe, Laura, any final words?
Oh, this has been great. Thank you everyone for the questions and the interactivity. And you'll receive a follow-up email. Give us a little bit to get the recording all buttoned up, but you'll get the follow-up with a copy of the recording as well.
Sounds like we might be scheduling a part 2 to this also.
I love it.
I'm excited for that. It was just full on Q&A podcast style. We'll go through it that way, which it's always exciting because you never know what gold is going to come out of something like that.
Yep.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you all for
all right.
joining.
Thank you,
Really
everyone. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks.